everyone, welcome. Thank you for coming. We're about to start. Just one more minute. We're streaming live on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Zoom. So we have people coming in from different platforms.
Pick up my mess.
So Cynthia, should we get started? Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Okay.
Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, great. Well,
okay.
Yes. Hi and welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're offering this program in conjunction with the beautiful exhibition here at the Hunterdon Art Museum, From the Ground Up, Peters Valley School of Craft, which was curated by Elizabeth Essner. And we have with us today a very special artist who is part of that exhibition, and I would say who's one of the highlights of the show. And we're going to discuss her work in depth today following a presentation that she will give of her work. And then we're going to open it up to the audience. So you'll be able to submit via the chat on Zoom, and we'll call from the chat and have a conversation with you. So before we begin, I want to make sure to thank the sponsors and funders who made this event possible. This program was made possible in part by a grant from the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, a state partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Thank you. Additional support for this exhibition was provided by the Windgate Foundation. Thank you. And the Marie and John Zimmermann Fund. Thank you. Museum programs are made possible also in part by funds from the New Jersey State Council of the Arts, which is a partner of the Agency of the National Endowment for the Arts, the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, thank you, and other corporations, foundations, and individuals. Thank you to all for making this possible. And with that, I'll just give a very brief introduction to Cynthia. I think we're going to discuss her work so much that I won't go at length, but I'll read to you what she's written about herself on her website, which I think is right to the point. The artist, designer, and founder, Cynthia Alberto, of the Brooklyn-based weaving and healing art studio Weaving Hand, seeks to bridge traditional and contemporary weaving techniques, drawing inspiration from ancient communities of Europe, Asia, Latin America, and Africa. Her artwork, performances, and public weaving projects honor traditional and artisanal techniques while also incorporating unconventional materials and a zero-waste philosophy. So, Cynthia Alberto, please tell us about your art.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Hunterdon Museum, Peters Valley. It's a great honor to be here and really thankful for the opportunity for giving me the residency. I'm just gonna go to the first slide and I'm gonna talk about my artist statement. Let's see, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, hold on for a minute. Okay, share. Okay, everybody can see that. I'm gonna go, this is actually what's in the museum right now. The picture on the left, which is also here, which is my series called the Techno Love Series. But before I get into that, I'm just gonna read to you a little bit of my journey. It's been 15 years opening up Weaving Hand, my healing and weaving art studio in Brooklyn. So it's been a journey of healing, getting to know a lot of people, and coming to where I am right now, that I have embraced again being an artist, because that was a disconnect between, not a disconnect, there was always been a line between Weaving Hand, as my livelihood and me as an artist. So I have come to a place finally that both of them can be together and, be represented. Okay, what is weaving to me? I started my art practice as a painter at the age of 25, without formal training, no bound by restrictions or medium. I incorporated fabrics and sewing into my paintings and went on to study at Fashion Institute of Technology. Over time, I began creating my own textiles as a foundation for my art. I see weaving as a form of therapy. It is very calming to witness myself and the loom create a cloth. As a teaching artist, I am very happy to share this beautiful craft with kids and adults, particularly those who are living with disabilities or trauma. I want to share the healing I received from weaving. The healing that I received from weaving, I just want to elaborate so we can get a little bit of view. I can talk about that. 15 years ago, I went through a life situation where I was kind of lost with two young children, and I opened my weaving studio. The weaving studio gave me and my children a place to heal, to hope, to learn about the craft. So it's always been the foundation of my work that weaving is something that heals people, and it's the same as art. Art heals. It's something that we can share with everybody. Okay. So, to continue, weaving in my everyday vocabulary. For me, it is healing. Textile cloth is our basic human covering who make it to feel safe from exposure to the harsh world. It can be fashionable, but deep down when we weave, we heal ourselves, the earth, the others. It is reassuring and liberating to be in control of the tools of creation. Sustainable. I weave with plastic bags and fabric scraps to help the environment. Working with reclaimed materials allows me to reimagine what a textile can be. It also teaches children to take care of our planet. Teaching. Passing the tradition to future generations, working with our hands is necessary, especially now that the Internet of Things is overtaking the world, further separating us from how things are made and function. Knowledge of weaving must not be lost. It is essential for our mental balance. Communal weaving. It is about creating for people, with people. Our future depends on communities coming together to care for one another. I begin many projects by building a site-specific loom with the help of local artisans so the local community can continue weaving after the exhibition. Respectful. Weaving has been around since the beginning of time. Every country has a weaving tradition. This knowledge is passed down from generation to generation. By working with weavers from all over the world, I give respect and voice to their culture. Cultured. Textile are a representation of the local weaving culture, but they all are also connected to different parts of the world. Weaving motifs from Asia are similar to those from Central America. They inspiration from nature. It is a way of life, a livelihood, often the way that women can survive. The ancient form is finally being recognized as such, decolonized from the stereotype that to weave is to make souvenirs for tourists. My practice reclaims the history of weaving as an indigenous culture that needs to be studied and preserved. In the time of the global pandemic, artists have a new responsibility to think globally, how to make a world a better place. A new consciousness is taking place, a renaissance led by voices that were once voiceless. Okay. So that's in the gist of my artist statement. So I'm gonna start going through my presentation. So the two pictures right here are my Techno Love series and also my hair series and my, what do you call it, wire series. And there's a loom in the back. So that's the loom I'm weaving while I'm at the museum during my residency. This is the Techno Love series 2017. I'm gonna give you a brief description on how they came about. So they are 30 cocoons that that activated and was part of the Museum of Art and Design 2018 Artist Residency. And so we activated them, but I want to show you how they are made. The ropes are from the MoMA PS1 Weaving the Courtyard installation by Escobedo Solis, winner of the Young Teen. I inherited all the ropes. We helped them deinstall the installation. They are very heavy. They were going to be thrown away. So we decided that we want to repurpose them, reimagine them, and make lots of other stuff with the ropes. So you can see right here, there's the ropes on the left-hand side and the loom right here. So they're all woven on a floor loom. They're about 30, 40 inches wide. They're quite heavy. So this is the last weekend activation in front of the Hunterdon Museum, and we activated the loom in front of the plaza. So that was it. Say thank you to T. He's a musician who gave us the wonderful music. So I just want to read about the Techno Love series, and the following slides are gonna show you more of their, what do you call it, a personality and a lot of like sculptural component to it. So Techno Love Series 2017, I started this weaving 30 of them. They're made out of cotton and neon rope, so they're quite heavy. The Techno Love series is inspired by the euphoric feeling of connecting with a community through music. It is comprised of 30 woven cocoons, which are pieces of wearable art. This curatorial approach references my desire to remain inclusive to all communities rather than an untouchable subject. While wearing the cocoon, one feels a sense of both protection and liberation to the weight of the ropes. The weight of the cocoons were inspired by the use of sensory pressured vests, which are used particularly with children or individuals who are overstimulated. Being inside the weaving offers enough of a mask from the surrounding environment that users are able to let go and move more freely without the fear of judgment. The result is an inclusive wearable piece of art which evokes a sense of playfulness, reflection, peace, and escape, which is very similar of that being in a techno festival. And I'm going to talk about the techno festival. The ropes woven into pieces were repurposed from an exhibition last summer at MoMA PS1 called Weaving the Courtyard by Studio Escobedo Solis. It was important for both Escobedo Solis and I to address the amount of waste produced by the art world by not letting the ropes go to waste, but instead reworking them into new pieces of art. So the inspiration for the Techno Love series actually came out. I went to a Techno Love festival in California and also did a activation there. I wove the community, and it was 4 days of techno music. And all I kept thinking is like, I wish I can like hide. I could go in a cocoon and just like be in my own world, because it was like a bit too much. So when I came back to New York, the cocoons happened. So Right here is the activation at the Friedman Gallery back in September 2018. As you can see, when you put on the ropes, it's the actual dancer or the performer who is controlling it and making it shape the way they want it to shape. So there's really a sculptural component to it, and everybody have their own personality of how they want to dance or they want to sit with it or play with it. And the cocoons are very playful, so you can touch it, you could put it on, you could dance with it. So it's nothing like you put on the wall and you stare at it. It's a very tactile piece of blanket. And here it is again. You can see the one on the right just sitting there. I love that, sitting together. Go. And this one is my favorite, one of my favorite photo, because they're all scattered around, but I love that garbage bag at the corner. So it's just kind of blends in. It's like an everyday object and it's very touchable. And these are the performers. And we're all just taking a breather because after a while where you're inside the cocoons, it's very hot. You know, you need to, even though they're kind of see-through, it's still kind of, hot and heavy. So this is inside the gallery. As you can see, they're all sitting down, but the, what do you call it? The blankets are just on the floor. So it's really just a piece of fabric. There it is. The whole waiting to activate. And here they are in a formation, waiting to perform together. And here are the dancers and the performance. It was a very special day. So the next one I want to talk about is take care of one another, which is actually the work that I'm doing in the museum. And so Elizabeth and I, Elizabeth, thank you, Elizabeth Essner. She's the curator of the From the Grounds Up, and what wonderful to work with you. So we decided that I would like to do a work that to gather the community. That's really part of my practice as I work with a lot of communities. So as the Hunterdon community and everyone to send us a message of hope and healing. Um, and then what we were doing is we were writing them on a piece of strips of fabrics, and I was weaving them on the museum. I'm almost done with it. So, and then everybody can come starting next month, I think next week to see the tapestry. So you could see right here, there are messages from everybody. And over here, this one I love my best friend. She loves me back. Hope for all the addicts to find, I can't see that one. Okay, so that's basically the whole work that I'm doing, weaving every weekend and making sure that we are giving voices for all the healing that needs to happen right now in our world. It's a very trying time, but we must gather together as a community to help one another. So here's just a short video of me weaving the tapestry. This is a 4 harness floor loom right here. And another view of the gallery with the tapestry. And I'm going to talk about the two works in the back. So hair tapestry, the one on the left from 2015, mercerized cotton mercerized yarn and synthetic hair wire tapestry on the right. So for me, this work early on is really about just materials and experimenting shapes to make sure that like I can push the fabric to another level, 2-dimensional. So this one, if you put your hand through the weaving, the hand will take on, I mean, the weaving will take on the shape of your hand. And here it is, more technical, incorporating materials. And that's it. I just want to say thank you, Peters Valley, Hunterdon Museum, Elizabeth, Esner, Jason, Brian, and happy to answer any question. And I think we're going to have some discussion, right? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Cynthia, for giving us that tour of your work. And you can see some of the pieces that she referenced are behind her. Cynthia's in the gallery at the Hunterdon Art Museum right now, and she'll be doing a workshop today. Is that right, Cynthia?
Doing the workshop tomorrow virtually from,
And you'll
but I am
be
going to be in the
in the
museum today.
galleries today making work. Yeah. Yeah, great. So part of the exhibition that Elizabeth Esner curated is the invitation of a number of artists in the show to actually make work within the museum space itself. So that's a wonderful opportunity, and I invite anybody to come in and see that today. So I just wanted to start out by responding to your rich work, Cynthia, by asking you, and which is how your work is so much about, as you said, connecting people and connecting places. And you mentioned through connection healing, but before we go there, just the connection itself is such an important part of your work. And so I'm wondering, as such a community oriented artist, such a socially oriented artist, how you see the thread itself as a connection, or if not a metaphor, how you think of the thread as connecting people directly.
So I, I mean, I'm a weaver, so there, I think we're all connected together. We're all fabrics, and every
Mm-hmm.
single thread contributes to the fabric, right? So as a community, I think we all have to think that we have to take care of one another, are respecting one another. And this is a lot of respect really has been coming up a lot lately, to me and to my practice, where we have to make sure that we are acknowledging one another. Because I think there's really sometimes a disconnect where we are, where we're taking things without asking permission or acknowledging where it's coming from. And I can delve into that and really expand that. But I think the thread, every single one of us is a thread, and when we weave together as a human being, we make the fabric stronger, we make the world stronger, we make our community stronger, because we are, one thread is really weak, but a whole bunch of threads are strong. You make a strong fabric, so you could carry the weight
Mm-hmm.
of the world with it, of the weight of your community, or the weight of the voiceless, as I say. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's beautiful. And our internet is a little more unstable than usual. So we're getting Cynthia mostly, but a little intermittently. But the beautiful nuggets that we hear are being woven together in their own way. And I think it's so beautiful how you respond that basically that society is a kind of fabric, but that also humans and communities are a kind of fabric, and to take that directly to the level of 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 existence of the body. Like, I think you referenced the body as a kind of fabric. We're made of a kind of biological fabric, and another the cells that make the fabric of our skin, as it were. And I know you weave a lot with human hair. So maybe you could say a little bit about the incorporation of that unusual but visceral material into your work of human hair and synthetic hair.
So when I wove the synthetic hair, I wasn't referencing any culture. It was more really a technical place of like experimenting with materials, how this hair would look next to this fabric. But I did when I was at the Museum of Arts and Design residency in 2018. I asked the community to donate hair, and I wove the hair into to this piece. Well, the hair is really in my culture, the Philippine culture. The hair is an amulet. We use the hair as a protection from spirits or
Mm,
from asking help from different deities, and really more of a what do you call it, spiritual gathering. So the hair has a lot of um, meaning, because the hair is really, we like, again, I'm gonna take it back to, we are all human beings. We all have hair. When you cut it, it it gives it back unconditionally. It grows, it's just like, okay,
mm,
I'll cut it.
mhm.
So the body is giving
Well,
unconditionally, so
okay.
you can have a hair again. So
Mhm.
that's the hair. A lot of people have donated a lot of hair, and I still have a lot of hair. But I also have to be very mindful and very respectful that those hair are coming from human beings that, very dear to them. So I think I'll pick up the hair series again sometime soon.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful what you say, and you didn't show the slide, but Cynthia was referencing. I think it's a project she did for the Museum of Art and Design, in which donated woven donated hair, basically like vests, right? That were activated by people who actually wore these hair vests. And I encourage everybody to look at Cynthia's website. They're incredible and visceral, and I think it's beautiful to think about um, the various ways that the technique of weaving belongs to so many parts of our world,
Mhm.
basically. That it has to do with the braiding of hair, it has to do with the double helix of DNA, it has to do with so much of what we encounter, these various ways in which we weave each other together emotionally with our words as a type of weaving of words. And it strikes me that, in fact, weaving is a very fluid art, therefore, that it's all abilities of weaving things and ideas together. And so, my question for you, Cynthia, is about the works behind you in the gallery. Not the cocoon, but the works farther behind you that are illuminated. And I asked you today in the gallery when we were talking, and you said we were talking about how those works for you are fluid, that they could keep going, that you would take them off the wall and keep expanding and cutting and changing and weaving them. And so I just wondered if you could say something about the living of weaving and of your work, of how it changes and grows.
Yeah. Well, I actually activate from when I do work. It's like cooking. I have the basic knowledge of it, like,
Mhm.
because I studied weaving from FIT, and I have the basic grounding of it. But it's my work is really about cooking. You're mixing things and picking things left and right. What feels right, what doesn't feel right.
Right.
So with the
Uh,
with the fabric, it's really beautiful to learn how to make a cloth, but then how do you push it to certain boundaries by adding, different materials. So the wire series is really about experimenting with sculptural. So you could put your hand through the wire, and the wire would
mhm.
like create its own image, the the shape of your hand. And the same thing what I'm currently doing right now, where I am fusing together pottery and weaving, where I'm making my own pottery loom out of clay looms. So again, pushing, trying to merge
Wow.
the two together and making sure that you are reimagining things. I think that's what it is. I think for me as an artist, that you always have to be playful with your imagination. Yeah, you have the basic knowledge of how to make a cloth, but how do we incorporate that to other things? How do we collaborate? That's what it is. It's really like collaborating with other
Mhm.
materials and other artists and like-minded people. And I think
Yes,
craft is really at the
that's
head to that.
yes, that's beautiful. And I can you just explain what a clay loom is? I don't know what that is. That sounds
Yeah,
absolutely
it's
fascinating.
well, it's basically I design my own clay loom, and then I weave on the loom. I wish I had a photo of it. So actually, instead of working with textile and fabrics, you are working with earth now, and you're touching there. And the earth and the clay is really a whole different
Wow.
feeling than the fabric, because when you touch a clay, and this is I experienced for the first time. And when I went, and also I want to talk about when the first time I went to Peters Valley in 2008, when I witnessed the clay studio, and the glass studio. I was just blown away that, like, wow, okay, there's another alternative to school. There's another way to
Mhm.
think and to be with like my with the people. Yeah. And like that beautiful. So when I went to Peters Valley for the first time in 2008, that really opened my mind, that like, oh, okay, I can escape from like the actual grinding of working, and be in a place where you're just making art for
Mhm.
yourself. So, but to go back to the clay, when I touch a clay, it's you're touching earth. It really is a whole different
Mhm.
feel, and it's such a
Mhm.
special feeling to touch the earth.
It's to hear you talk about again, Cynthia, as an art historian, it's it's always a challenge, a beautiful challenge to look at contemporary art because how do you make a history of the contemporary is always a question. And so I'm still learning about your work and trying to understand it more deeply. And I'm in love with your work. And one thing that it makes me think of is again how it engages the question of how the world is a kind of loom. And this idea that we can weave in so many different ways with so many different things, including conversation. And your point about clay, that you can now weave with clay, that
Well,
you
no, like
can weave.
it's to make the loom out of the clay. So you're actually I'm making the loom, designing a
Mhm.
clay loom, but not really weaving the clay yet.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Well, I heard you in a different way, probably be in
Yeah.
and out, but maybe it's no mistake that I heard it that way because that was very exciting to me. But nonetheless, weaving with hair and all the different materials that you engage as a kind of fiber, whether that be hair or the or wire, or all the different forms of fiber art that you expansively consider, that that there's a way to weave fiber by other means. And so that brings to mind the question of Ruth Asawa's work, for example. And you and I have talked a little bit about that. I wondered if you could tell me about if at all, if Ruth Asawa's woven wire sculptures have inspired you, and if so, how?
Yeah. Yeah, she's really one of my big inspiration. The work and also her life journey, how she really, what do you call it? The work ethics. And I think what it is, it's the humbleness. It's really, it's not working to
Mhm.
be in a big place, but working. She was making art for herself. She was making art for
Mhm.
herself, her friends, and it's something that was very therapeutic for her. And she was really, she supported a lot of communities. Yeah, so reading her and her journey from being in the intermittent camp, um, when she was put, when her family and a whole bunch, and also all the Japanese community put in the intermittent camp, and also surviving lupus, and at the same time, all that time still making art and making sure that she's still making art for herself. That's what it is. So that is a big inspiration for me. I mean, I read a lot of her books about her, and now is the time that she's being recognized and given the voice of her contribution to the art world, and not being put in pigeonhole in a corner.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the questions we ask as a museum and as an institution is how these questions of craft get exploded and deconstructed. And you're an artist really on the forefront of that. How to both engage the important traditions of quote unquote craft while nonetheless in your expansive way blossoming as a contemporary artist with full recognition in your own right. So I agree at the level of biography in terms of Asawa, but I'm also interested in, I've written about Ruth Asawa's work, and my thoughts about her work are that her woven wire sculptures are about transcending the concept of race, and which of course is really important in her life because as you referenced, she was somebody who was interned at Rower Camp in Arkansas. And so I'm wondering, because you brought it up, how your cocoons, and we've talked about this before, but how your cocoons are like a second skin, and they drape over the body, but they also obscure the physical body. And in that way, how your cocoons might, in their own way, transcend race and be a kind of beautiful equalizing fabric in these performances.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we are in a place right now that a lot of things are being highlighted. There's a lot of reckoning going on right now, and it's just where we are in the
Mhm.
world, in a lot of institutions, in schools, organizations. So we are very aware of that. I started the cocoons with really not thinking of any race or any, but we had our conversation. I think the cocoons are utilitarian, they're blankets, but at the same time, when you put it on, it doesn't, the cocoons don't have any particular, it's not representing anything at the moment, but it's representing the self of the person in it, because when it activates, it's actually dancing with the person and their personality in it. So I think I would see it like we are all, together into our dancing, but then inside the cocoon, we are really very different from one another. So it could come out
Mm.
as like a community. We are a community, and there's always going to be highlighted about race and our differences. But from the outside, we really have to make sure that we are all taking care of one another, and the blankets are
Mm.
utilitarian, they're coverings. So if somebody is what do you call it, need a blanket, you can take off the blanket and give that blanket to somebody else. That's
Mhm.
like the way I see it. So
Mhm.
the blanket is really, the cocoons are for everybody. Yeah.
Wow, that's a beautiful response. Thank you so much, Cynthia. That makes me think about how your blankets, yes, are universal in the sense that yeah, they make a radically equal body, but they also, and that might be the concept of race or critical race theory, but at the same time, what you said is so beautiful and it's related, which is they're equalizing in a different way as well, which is they're like equal equal shelters for each of the people inside,
Yeah.
like equal tents. Everybody, like you said, everybody gets a blanket, right? Everybody gets the economic distribution they deserve. So they're beautifuls of equality in a different way. Could you speak a little bit about what it might be like to be inside one of those cocoons? What does it feel like?
It
You
feel
talked about how you're a personality inside them, like it's a very internalizing thing. We're like,
yeah.
yeah, like I imagine being a kid under a blanket and like you get to just go anywhere you want, you know.
Yeah, that's it. Your imagination, you put it on, and if you're having like an anxiety, you put it on and you shelter yourself from the world. But it's also that you put it on and you feel happy about, and you're just like in your own like clubhouse,
Mhm.
right? They're heavy, so they are,
Yes. Yeah.
you feel the weight of them, but at the same time they're also playful. There's really something when you put them, like, we all have masks on now, so we always feel like, oh, I can kind of like, I'm semi visible, but when you're inside the pool you are invincible. So it's like, oh, okay, I can be like
Yeah.
whatever I want to be and be in my own world.
Yes.
Mm.
That's fantastic. So we want to open it up to any of our attendees to submit questions in the online chat. We'll keep talking, and but if there's anybody who has a question for Cynthia, or, you know, or for me, we'll submit it into our conversation and discuss it. So yeah, and this is casual, and you know, it can be any kind of question. We're happy to talk about it. So yeah, just type it into the chat. But so Cynthia, another really interesting component of your work is how it engages the concept of healing. And that's a concept that is related to everything we've been talking about, to the network, to the web, the social web that binds us all together, to the biological web that unracialized equality that the cocoons might suggest, to the equality of distributing a tent or a childhood fort to everybody who wears one, to the equality of being able to weave whatever material and make the world into your loom. Those are all kind of beautiful versions of equality that are also healing. So I'm just wondering if you could talk about healing. You said something about it in the beginning of you read your statement, but maybe you could just talk more about healing and how it relates to your practice of weaving.
um the healing, well, it's with weaving and healing because it personally impacted me and helped me a lot and helped my children a lot in a
Mhm.
way of like healing mentally, emotionally, financially, because the weaving studio really, is my livelihood, which I raised my two kids and still my livelihood. And so I started a programs when I opened the studio a couple of years, where we work with agencies to help adults and children with disabilities. So they come,
Mm,
yeah. So that is really one of the main foundation of my practice and my studio. It doesn't mean that we are doing clinical healing, but we're doing social healing and giving a
mhm,
place, a
mhm.
safe space for our community, that they come to the studio, weave, make a fabric, and feel really proud about it. Yeah. So
Mhm.
it's again the same thing of a community weaving together and healing together with our healing arts. And it's also not just with our, you know, with our healing arts. It's also it transfer also to like if you are having trauma and you wanna
Mhm.
heal through that trauma, the weaving is one way you could use that loom so your mind is not looping over and over again. And we know that back in World War I, weaving was used as a healing for the veterans. And I've seen pictures of that,
Mm.
studied that. The Brooklyn Navy Yard have a big
Yes,
archive of
that's
like
very interesting. Yeah.
um, of how they use weaving as a rehabilitation for the veterans to come back because of the trauma that they have experienced from the war. So, and also going to different communities and but being very respectful to those communities that you are not coming in as to be a gentrifier or to be a savior, but to really
Mhm.
help those communities who might not have access to weaving after school program. And so go there and say, okay, we can do a program so the kids, the senior citizens can do like after school programs. So always coming from a respectful place of not taking but giving. Sometimes nowadays there's really a lot of like things going on with different neighborhoods that are changing because of the nature of economic, you know, reality of neighborhoods are
Yeah. So,
mm-hmm.
oh, sorry, Cynthia, I didn't mean to interrupt. There was a blip in the stream, the video stream, but I think you were concluding your point. But anyways, yeah, that's so interesting, and also to think about how craft has always been a concept that is with therapy, with healing, from the as basically craft as in from the 19th century concept of a way of um, healing or an antidote to the alienation of capitalist production. So that's awesome. We have some great questions coming from people that I'm gonna put out there, which are related. So one is from Sandra Dudley, who asks about your cocoon. Interesting question, which is, did you conceive of the idea of the cocoon first, or did you, yeah, or did you just wait until, she says actually nicely, just, or did you just wait until you found the right thread? So in other words, was it a kind of spontaneous or organic thing, or was it a
It was
preconceived
very spontaneous.
project?
It was very spontaneous. I came back from the Techno Love festival, and then I was in a show with a curator, and they're like, "Oh, we need some works," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, let's weave this. Let's put the tape." It's like again picking things up and then making a prototype out of it, and then we kept just doing it till it was the right temperature.
Mm,
Thank you, Sandra.
great. Yeah, thank you, Sandra. That was a great question. And another question is that you said that you create a loom and you leave it for the community. And if you could say a little bit more about that practice, if that's your practice.
Yeah. So I design my looms like big looms that can accommodate a lot of people weaving on it at the same time. I don't have photos of it on the website, but if you go through my Instagram, you can see it. So it's the idea of having like a communal table, people eating, but also people weaving together. So I have designed
Mm-hmm.
a tabletop loom where people can weave around that table. So again, communal, talking to each
Mm-hmm.
other. Yeah.
Wow. Beautiful. And also getting back to reconstituting community as a practice of healing, conversation as a form of weaving. These are threads that we're engaging throughout this conversation. It's so interesting to learn about it and through you, Cynthia. And I wanted to also go back for just 1 second and comment that what you run, your studio and your classes and yeah, your life's work is that you're engaging in the practice of teaching weaving and taking that out into the community, which is also related to Ruth Asawa's work, her school, her community engagement. So I wanted to point that out. But we have another really interesting question. Take it as you like it. I'll read it as it is, and you can respond to it by shooting it down or otherwise making it into a world. But the question is, has motherhood influenced your practice?
Yeah, I mean, I was before my children were born, I was an artist, and I was really at the point where making some steps, some positive openings. But then I got pregnant with my first child, and I put it aside, took care of my two children, and it was really hard because I always felt like, oh, I'm gonna miss that part of me, it's gonna go away. But it's not. You just need to cultivate it, that the light, the seed is there, and for some reason, it's growing in a different way, growing together with motherhood, making sure that they're taken care of, because they need all that you know support. But at the same time, that you have that seed cellular. And I'm gonna reference one artist, which is Hurtado. What's Rita? And she's like 90 something six. She just recently passed away, but she talked about motherhood in her work. And she was making work for herself all her life, and just recently, it was her time to be known, to be recognized, to be out there. So, but she's somebody that maybe you should look to, because it's really beautiful the way she put motherhood and making art together is really one. There's a symbiotic component to it.
Can you say the artist's name again? Because I'm not familiar with her, and maybe I'll type it in the chat so people
Yeah,
can look her
yeah,
up.
Rita Hurtado. Um, could not
Okay,
be.
maybe you could type that in.
Yeah, okay, I will do it.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. And that question came, by the way, from the curator of the exhibition, Elizabeth Essner. And what a beautiful world you made of that question, in the sense that you're constellating your work. And so a great question, you're constellating your work, Cynthia, with other women artists who are thinking about the entanglements of motherhood with practice and being. So that's really interesting. So we're drawing to a close, and we don't have too much more time. But any last questions so we can get them in here before we have to leave, like in the next couple of minutes, if you could put them in, and if there are no more questions, that's great too. But I guess if I had a closing question, Cynthia, it would be how these two works in the exhibition speak to each other. And I know you've spoken about what a pleasure it has been to work with Elizabeth Essner, the curator, and of course her voice, her brilliant voice is in this exhibition. So that's another thing to discuss. But I guess I'm asking you, as the artist, what these two particular works say to each other. The cocoon and the two works behind you. I guess it's three works, but as a kind of constellation.
I think the works, the background on the wall, the Wire and the Hair series, those were my earlier works, where I was really experimenting with technique, and thinking, how do we take those technique and make it jump, make it activate. So having the cocoons and finally finding that medium that you could take it off the wall. You could take the tapestry, you could take the cloth out the wall and put it onto someone, become a wearable art and be it a performance. So that this itself is a journey of where I am right now at the moment. And hopefully I could push it again to the next level. And most of it, now that I'm thinking of it, now that I have spent time in the gallery, and when I look at them, I'm like, oh, okay, they jumped off the wall and they're on the thing. And then when we activated it last week, it was like, oh, they're coming out of the museum now. Okay, they're on the plaza next to the people. So it's that I think art is very inclusive. You know, there are arts that you, of course, you can't touch. For me, my own personal, I'm not speaking for everybody. I think art is something really should be interactive, you know, in with my personal work, that should really embrace people. It's not something that you feel intimidated to looking at, but something that can embrace you and be part of you. So when you go out of a place, a museum, a gallery, a plaza, you take an essence of it with you. Does that make sense?
That's yes, it does. It's a beautiful closing thought that that you're weaving. I love you use the term activation when you talk about your work, and that's not a word. And maybe this owes to my inexperience in the world of weaving, but I haven't heard the term activation paired with fiber art before so beautifully, or maybe at all, in the sense that this idea that these threads that, as you show us, bind us together are something that we activate ourselves. And you know, all of our clothes that we're now wearing, right, are activated by our presence. And so there's a presence, there's a beautiful presence in your work. Yes, a human presence.
Yeah.
And to be able to carry that with you out of the gallery and into the world is exactly the point. So thank you, Cynthia, so much for your beautiful presentation and the conversation, which was a pleasure. And thank you to everybody for their really great questions, and to Elizabeth Essner for her curatorial prowess. And to all of our sponsors, thank you. There will be 2 more of these artists talks in connection with the Peters Valley exhibition coming up, and I invite all of the attendees to that that programming that is coming up in over the next 2 months, and information about which can be found on our website. So thanks so much and have a great day. Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth.